All right, great. Thank you for coming today. The main focus of my presentation will be on the work of an astrologer named Roseanne Finn and her work with the Pluto cycle, which I'm going to explain in detail. Okay? And it's really exciting what she discovered in terms of what's about to happen in the very near future and how that has some implications, I think, for the new humanity or the emergent new humanity, and how we can possibly see that through this Pluto cycle that she talks about. All right, and before I get into that, though, the first talk I did was about a few weeks ago was about the USA chart. Anyone here? Anyone was there for that? She was. Okay. There's one thing I didn't cover I wanted to talk about. What I basically said is the USA, when you look at our birth chart, July 4th, 1776, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 5:08 p.m. We've got an amazing birth chart, and I explained why. That was the topic last time. And the main reason is Jupiter is the planet of protection. It's Zeus. It gives good luck and prosperity, grace, high levels of integrity. The USA has some problems in the chart that would explain our shadow side. But overall, we have an amazing birth chart with this Jupiter influence. Okay, so
excuse me, is that online?
And the video of that talk is online. Yeah. Okay. So I went into great detail about that. But there's one thing I didn't say, which I think is really interesting. Imagine this is a zodiac. Okay, this circle. And imagine this is one planet and this is another planet. In astrology, can you all see that? In astrology, when two planets are about 120 degrees away from each other, it's called a trine, like two water signs or two earth signs. And if they're around the same degree, say Mars is at 15 degrees of Leo and another planet's at more or less 15 degrees of Aries, that's a very harmonious relationship between they help each other. They're shaking hands. They're giving each other a hug. So if it was Mars and Venus, they would be bringing out the best in each other when they had that kind of relationship. But sometimes you see in a chart when there's a third planet. So what happens is you get a triangle. Can you see that?
Yep.
So that's called a grand trine in astrology. So a grand trine, if I see someone has a birth chart with a grand trine, that means that it's something they brought over from a previous life, usually a high level of talent or skill in that area indicated by the planets, by the archetypes. So it could be Mars, Venus, Moon, or you could have more. You have two planets here, one here. So it's called. So it might be all the three water signs are represented, all the three fire signs, and that's a super some kind of high level. You see that with people, like they're just really good with. Kids that are 7 years old and they're really good at taking things apart and right away they don't have to learn it, you know. And you can see that in their chart, this mechanical ability, all right? Or somebody, if it's water signs, a grand trine, they would have this naturally intuitive and kind of psychic and from childhood, okay? So if we look at the USA chart in our election day and our inauguration day, you see something that was true until 1933. You see something really interesting. So USA's birthday is July 4th, right? Every July 4th, the sun is at 13 degrees of Cancer, okay? And that degree actually connects to the fixed star Sirius. And Sirius is the brightest star in the sky. And it's known to give great good fortune. So just the fact that the USA 13 degrees of Cancer, July 4th, it's receiving the beneficent rays of the fixed star Sirius, plus all the Jupiter energy that I talked about. So that's every July 4th that happens. So the founding fathers set it up so that election day every year for presidential election day is on November 4th, approximately, right? On that day, the sun is at 13 degrees of Scorpio every year around. But on election, so what's happening is that the election day and the elections, the presidential elections, are tapping into the positive way to the USA birth chart. All right, and all that positive Jupiter energy that's in our birth chart is Jupiter protects. It it guarantees integrity, honesty. So they set it up that it's on that the election day was on November 4th. All right, that's really cool. Imagine this is a mountaintop, and all this positive energy, Jupiter energy, is flowing right downhill, right through this channel, and protecting the presidential elections. And then they set it up that inauguration day was on March 4th of the following year, right? And on March 4th, it just so happens, coincidentally, is it, that the sun is at 13 degrees of Pisces, the other water sign. So what that created was a grand trine, all right? And so what this meant that on the inauguration, when the president put his right hand on the Bible and swore to protect the Constitution, what's happening from an astrological point of view is the positive energy from our birth chart, Jupiter, integrity, is flowing into the president's psyche on that day, okay? And so it makes me wonder, was this a coincidence that this happened, or was there an astrologer behind this? All right? I think there was, probably Ben Franklin, right? Because this shows there's an astrologer who said it's intentional to do that. And then what happened, the 20th Amendment came along, and one of the provisions of the 20th Amendment was, we don't need to wait till March 4th to have the inauguration, because we've got airplanes and cars and better roads. They needed more time back in the 1800s. And, okay, it's taken too long, so they moved it back to January 19th. And so President Roosevelt was the last president to be sworn in on March 4th, 1933. Wow. His first term. And his following two, he had 3 terms. The following 2, he was inaugurated on January 19th. But I think the fact that his first term was under this influence carried through all 3 terms. So you can make a point that I think there's a connection. Starting after World War II with Truman and every president since then who's been inaugurated on January 19th, something was lost. What was lost was this grand trine, beautiful connection, and that Jupiter integrity, and honesty, and coming from the high moral standard that would flow in from the USA birth chart when the president said, does what he gets inaugurated. And you can look at what the United States started doing when we became the sole superpower, starting to support dictators around the world, overthrow democratically elected. We never did that before. Okay, not that every president before 1933 was. There was some crooked stuff going on now and then, but it was small scale usually and domestic. The Teapot Dome. Under Harding in the 20s. That was a big, but it was relatively. Now, it seems like we lost touch in some way with our core values as a country by supporting dictators. And one of the main, you can go on for Chile, Brazil, Haiti, all over Latin America that we did this to protect corporate interests and to stop socialism and communism from taking root there. That was. But one of the main interventions was, and Fereshte would know this, that in 1953, the CIA overthrew the democratically elected government in Iran. Did you know that? His name was.
One of many.
Yeah, his name was Mohammad Mossadegh, and the CIA orchestrated, and the reason they did that is because this democratically elected president nationalized Iranian oil. The British had control of Iranian oil. Iran was just a colony, and the Brits were not happy about that, and the U.S. wasn't happy about our need for oil. So we couldn't let that happen. So they orchestrated his overthrow. They brought the Shah in, who had been in exile. They brought him back in power. And over the next 20 years, he proceeded to be a dictator. He lurched Iran into embracing Western values. Am I right, Fereshte? He lurched it to the West, and that really upset people, particularly the more conservative religious figures in Iran. And he persecuted the mullahs, and that led to. Finally, people had enough. That led to the 1979 when Ayatollah Khomeini, they brought him back from Paris, and he became the president. And ever since then, it's been anti-Western, anti-Israel, destroy Israel as a state. And if we hadn't done that, that's what I'm saying, that Iran was a model of democracy in the Middle East, if we had protected that instead of protecting our oil interests, the whole history of the Middle East would be different today. Probably there would have been a peace deal in the Middle East. Because Iran is supporting the anti-Israel terrorist organizations, and they're committed to, the West, the United States is the devil, and Israel doesn't have a right to exist. So you can't have it. So this thing that we did in 1953 is still playing out, and we just bombed Iran recently. So it goes on and on and on. And these are the kind of things that happen after. What I'm saying is the inauguration day got switched to January 19th. Wow. I think the president would have been, all the presidents would have been tapping into that higher level of integrity and honesty. So something to think about.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk about what I think is this amazing research by an astrologer who lives on the West Coast named Roseanne Finn, and she's done all this research on the Pluto cycle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain her research, and then we're going to watch an interview with her. So by the time we watch the interview, which is an hour long, you'll have a basis for understanding what she's saying. All right? Okay? So, and the topic I gave for today was Pluto and the New Humanity. Because Pluto's a really fascinating planet, actually, and it got demoted several years ago to be a dwarf planet, right? And Pluto's not happy about that. Pluto's feelings got really hurt, and I want to show you why. I want to show you why did Pluto's feelings get really hurt. This is a photograph of Pluto taken by the New Horizons spacecraft that went by in 2015. What do you see?
A heart.
Yeah, Pluto's got a heart. Where? Right there. See the heart shape?
No.
That's an ice field.
Yeah.
That's amazing. It's a heart shape.
It's pink too.
So I'm just teasing. Pluto has a heart. Pluto got his feelings.
But I mean, can you believe it?
So I'm going to cover, first of all, just some basics of Pluto in astronomy, just the astronomical facts about Pluto. Then we're going to look at Pluto in astrology, and then I'm going to give you a summary of Rosie Quinn's theory. Okay? All right? That's where we're headed. Pluto in astronomy. All right. Let's watch this. That New Horizons spacecraft, we get another view, took thousands of photos, and they stitched them together into like a video. And so the New Horizons spacecraft in 2015 did a really close flyby to the surface, and then it headed out further. So that's, watch, this is really fascinating. It's like a minute long. As it zooms in on, getting closer and closer to Pluto. These are real images. Speed it up.
Here she comes. Wow. There's Baba's face.
I was looking. I couldn't find it. Somebody sees
there
it.
it is. Oh my gosh.
On the other side.
Look at that.
It's only half frozen.
Yeah.
Leonardo da Vinci and Galileo would have been thrilled by this.
I mean, that's a heart-shaped feather.
It's
like, wow.
It's all ice, heart of ice.
I see a turtle.
So the spacecraft got really down low, and then it took off and zoomed out into the beyond the edge of the solar system, like Jupiter Belt.
Wow.
Those animals.
That's it. I think it got within 30 miles or something.
If you can serial carry and you want to do so comfortably, you're probably going to be interested in this, the brand new Nimbus Gray Vantage holster. And what you're really going to like...
Skip.
Pardon?
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Pluto in astronomy was discovered on February 18th, 1930, by the Lowell Observatory in Arizona. And it had been predicted its location mathematically by Percival Lowell. He called deviations in the orbits of Uranus and Neptune that might be explained by the presence of another body out there affecting their orbit. And then this little girl named it. Her name is Venetia Burney, and she knew, and her father was on the team, and so they were talking about it at breakfast, and she was into Greek mythology and knew about Pluto, and she said, "Why don't we call it Pluto?" And they did. And what's amazing is how when planets are named, that it's usually astronomers or scientists who name them, but it always seems that they get the myth and the archetype right, the meaning of it. That it fits perfectly, right? All right, so it was reclassified as a dwarf planet, sorry Pluto, in 2006, and it has to do with its gravitational field. It's too small, not being able to clean out the environment around it, something like that. But Pluto's a very powerful archetypal influence, which we'll see. It has 5 known moons: Charon, Hydra, Nix, Kerberos, and Styx. And this is interesting. It's 1/3 water, water ice, and it's more than 3 times as much water as on all the Earth's ocean. And the remaining 2/3 are rock. And there's several mountain ranges, scattering of craters, which is and it's actually smaller than the Earth's moon, so it's pretty small. And this is essential for what we're going to be covering. Pluto's orbit is highly eccentric and inclined compared to other planets. I'm going to show you a visual image of this in a second. Compared to the other planets, its orbit is more egg-shaped, okay, or elliptical. So that means Pluto's distance from the Sun varies significantly, and for about 20 years out of its 248-year orbit, it's actually closer to the Sun than Neptune. So it comes within Neptune's orbit for about 20 years. And Pluto has 248 years to make one revolution around the Sun. So that's going to be important for what we're going to be covering. So Pluto's orbit is tilted at 17-degree angle relative to the average plane of the other planets. So let me show you that, what that looks like. Here. You see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really strange.
Yeah.
Right? And this is one of the reasons why Pluto goes out of bounds so much. And from the point of view, I'm not explaining what out of bounds is. From the point of view of the Earth, Pluto's tilted at 17 degrees. The Earth is tilted on its axis at 23 degrees. Okay? So when we look at Pluto from the point of view of the Earth, it goes what's called out of bounds, and I'll explain that more frequently or on a regular basis. The other planets are fairly their circular orbit is fairly within the plane. Saturn almost never goes out of bounds. Saturn is a rule follower, and it's following all the rules. Saturn won't go out of bounds, but the Moon does, Mercury, some, Venus does, Uranus and Jupiter not too much, and Neptune not too much. But Pluto's way out there. So that's a 17-degree tilt from the flat.
Wow.
Okay. All right. And then let's look at Pluto in astrology. In myth, Pluto was the ruler of the underworld. Right? The earlier name for the god was Hades, which became more a common name as the underworld itself. So Pluto represents a more positive concept of the god who presides over the afterlife. In Greek cosmology, Pluto received the rule of the underworld in a 3-way division of sovereignty over the world, with his brother Zeus ruling the sky. Uranus has a lot to do with the sky. And his brother Poseidon, sovereign, getting rule over the sea, and that would be Neptune. And then his central narrative in myth describes Pluto abducting Persephone to be his wife, and then she becomes the queen of the underworld. And that myth is in so many different cultures, where and Persephone was this shy adolescent who gets abducted, and then she becomes a very powerful queen of the other. So Persephone has become a archetype for women stepping into their power and their strength. Okay. Pluto, there's a quote, Pluto is associated with all myths of descent and transformation, and with all the deities of destruction and regeneration, death and rebirth. Dionysius, Hades, and Persephone, Pan, Medusa, Lilith, Inanna, the Babylonian goddess, Isis, or Osiris from Greece, from Egypt, the volcano goddess Pele, Quetzalcoatl from Mexico, the Mayans, the serpent power misspelled there, Kundalini, Shiva, Kali, and Shakti in Indian mythology. So this theme of death and rebirth, descending into the underworld, going through all kinds of suffering, having your ego stripped down to nothing, and then coming back, re-emerging as a more whole, more complete person or more powerful person. Pluto has a lot to do with. So it has to do with our inner subconscious, our inner psyche, and on the outside, it has to do all these powerful forces of nature that are the volcanoes that are so disruptive. And so Pluto symbolizes transformation, power, rebirth, and it's also associated with intense generational shifts. Pluto rules the sign of Scorpio and is considered the planet of the underworld, representing hidden depths, secrets, and the cyclical nature of destruction and renewal. So Kali,
You got a thing happening, Joe, on the screen. There you
the creator, the preserver, and the destroyer, the triune nature of God. So Pluto would be more the destroyer and the creator too, because there's the region. Not so much the preserver, but destroyer and creator after the destruction. According to evolutionary astrology, which I'm into, looks at how you can read the past life and a birth chart and the key lessons that we're here to learn in this life based on past life, what's brought over, what needs to be balanced out. Okay? So Pluto's placement in a birth chart symbolizes our unconscious ego attachments formed in past life that gave us a sense of emotional security in the material world. Social status, career, family, physical appearance, money, possessions, romance, these are all ego attachments, achievements, abilities, addictions, etc. So you can see when you look at Pluto on the birth chart, that says something about unconsciously where we got our sense of security and attachment to the physical realm, to the gross sphere, that we want to keep that. It's working for us, okay? It gives us that sense of, we don't want to let go of the illusion. The ego wants to hold tight to it out of fear, you know? So when I look at Pluto, evolutionary astrologers look at Pluto in the birth chart, you can see where in the past, unconsciously, that person, what kind of attachments they had that they need to let go of. And it's the opposite sign. So if Pluto's in Libra in the chart, then that would suggest relationships were overly important to a person. Codependency. They define themselves through relationships. Joy, and then where they need to go in this lifetime is the opposite Aries. So it's always the opposite sign. That would suggest where the balance point is. Okay? So they need to develop more Aryan qualities, be more independent. Not that they're not in relationships, but they need to be in relationships in a different way, where they don't define themselves entirely by the other person. They pour me into the mold of what you want from me, and I'll do it. That kind of thing. Whereas Pluto in Aries is more, hey, I don't agree with you. Too bad. You know, that doesn't make sense for me. Where you can stand up for what your truth and still be in a relationship. Okay? So that's just an example. The sign in the degree directly opposite Pluto in a birth chart signifies the qualities we need to develop to balance Sanskaras so we can continue to evolve psychologically and spiritually. Make sense? Yeah. So Pluto's this really, really significant archetype. And it's generational too. Since Pluto spends 20 years approximately, it varies in each sign, that it has an effect on a whole generation, on what they're looking, what important values are there for that generation. So Generation X, Generation Y, a lot of those generations are defined by what sign Pluto is in for that period. Okay? Pluto is the ultimate agent of change, representing significant, often radical shifts in consciousness and personal evolution. Pluto represents our collective learning as a species. And it's associated with power, control, both personally and collectively, and the misuse of power, which we'll look at. The underworld, our own underworld and our psyche, our subconscious, or the Freudian sense of the underworld, and also the underworld, criminal underworld, okay, all the dark places where people hide what they're doing. The darker aspects of the human psyche, taboos, secrets, and this has a lot of Scorpio energy to it. Death and rebirth, it signifies the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. So destruction as a catalyst for new growth. I mentioned the generational influence. So Pluto is in Aquarius now. It went into the sign of Aquarius on November 19th last year, and it's going to remain in Aquarius until 2044. Okay?
Wow.
So, and Pluto was last in Aquarius in 1778 to 1798. So, yeah. So what that means is Pluto is going to revolutionize that, how that archetype of Aquarius gets expressed, how people express it. And that's Aquarius is humanitarian. Everyone's equal, brotherhood, all those values that came out during the American Revolution and the French Revolution. It's going to have Aquarius has a lot to do with new technology, AI. AI has taken off since Pluto went into Aquarius, and over the next 20 years, we won't recognize the world. Here are some keywords for Pluto. I'm not going to read them all. I'm just going to scroll through them, just to give you a sense of the wide range of possible meanings. Pluto says evolution. Pluto is like a two-sided coin. On one side, it represents our unconscious attachments to the gross world that keep us in the physical, and identifying, like I said, with achievements, money, social status, physical appearance, whatever. That becomes what makes us feel safe in the world. That's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin of Pluto is the evolutionary impulse. And that's what evolutionary astrology. It's that divine spark that pushes our soul to let go of those ego attachments. And we either cooperate, in which case that transition, we make those changes smoothly or relatively smoothly, or if we resist it, then we're going to have a Plutonian crisis in our life. We lose someone dies, we get cancer, we get sick, some life or death crisis that feels like we're being killed emotionally, and then through that Pluto says, you're gonna, okay, you don't want to change, you want to cooperate with me, then we're gonna have to do it my way. Bam, boom, okay, and the Plutonian crisis happens. Fanaticism, fearlessness. Pluto's a higher octave of Mars. Mars is a powerful energy, but Pluto steps it up. Nuclear energy. Okay. Sexuality, extremes of sexuality are also represented. Right? Phoenix is a symbol for the death and rebirth of a bird. Psychoanalysis. It's interesting that whenever a planet is discovered, if you look at what's happening in the world culturally, what the zeitgeist is at that time, you see that gives an idea what the meaning of that. And so Pluto was discovered in 1931, so Freudian analysis, atomic energy, crime, the mafia, and the underworld was really, during the Depression, was really prevalent. Chicago, New York, etc. The Depression, the extreme of poverty would be a Plutonian. The Great Depression would be a Plutonian event. Rage, anger, extreme anger, taboos, violence, volcanic eruptions, literally volcanic eruptions, and also wealth, power. So there's a positive side, great wealth, great power. Pluto is associated in the body with the reproductive system and the organs of elimination, such as the bladder and the colon. And caves, mines, underground resources, obsidian, garnet, plutonium, black onyx, nuclear reactor, nuclear weapons, weapons of mass destruction, corporations, Wall Street, extreme wealth, and organized crimes. Some of the things associated with Pluto. All right?
Nothing lightweight about it.
Nothing lightweight about it at all. So they say it's a dwarf planet, but these little guys carry the big. So I said Pluto spends different amount of time in each of the signs because of that elliptical orbit. And so let's start with Aries over here. Actually, it spends some of the most time on with Aries, Taurus, Gemini. 29 years. It spends the most time in the sign of Taurus. And that's interesting because Taurians are typically known to resist change. It's an earth sign, so maybe Pluto had to be in there a lot longer to drag it out of its attachments. Gemini, 30 years. Cancer, 25 years. And then less and less in Leo, 18. Virgo, 14. My sign, Libra, 12, only 12 years. And Scorpio, Pluto rules Scorpio, so that's the least amount of time. It's like Scorpio's got it down. Okay, they're willing to make these they're willing to go deep and make the changes, right? Only 11, half as much time is less, a third as much time almost as it spends in Taurus. 12 years in Sag, 16 years, and then the sign we're in now, Aquarius, it spends 19 and a half years, and then Pisces, 23 years. All right, so that's because of that elliptical orbit. All right, so with those basics, so this woman, Roseanne Finn, what she did is look at Pluto going back to 1800 BC and the cycle Pluto makes. And to explain this cycle, I need to show a few things here. Just I want to give you some framework. So when a planet's in the signs, like it's in the sign of Cancer or Virgo, that's the longitude. There's longitude and latitude. You can, to know where you're located on the globe, you have longitude and latitude, right? Yeah. If you only have one, if you only have longitude, you could be anywhere from the North Pole to the South Pole in that line. So when you have longitude and latitude, you can place yourself precisely, or you know where it is. Okay? So same with planets. The longitude corresponds to the sign. If a planet's at 10 degrees of Virgo, that's the longitude. But planets also have latitude. And the way they determine the latitude is this. So this is the Earth's equator. Okay, can you see that? This is the Earth's equator. If you were to take that Earth at the belt of the equator and expand it out to include the whole solar system, it's a circle of the equator, tilted. The Earth is tilted at 23 degrees angles, tilted at 20 to include the whole solar system. So all the planets are in there. That's what astronomers do. It's called the celestial equator. Okay, and at the equator, the latitude is 0 degrees. Right? And then it goes all the way up to 90 degrees north or 90 degrees south, right? So any city will have a certain, Myrtle Beach, I think it's 33 degrees longitude, I forget what the latitude is. So because of the Earth's tilt at 23 degrees, planets can only be viewed either 23.5 degrees north of the celestial equator or 23.5 degrees south of the celestial equator. They only move in that zone, going up and down. And they move, as the planets move, they move in a sine curve. Okay, here's the celestial equator. Here's 23 north, 23 south. Every planet will be, in the latitudes, will be making a sine curve. As it goes up from, this is 0 degrees. It'll go up to around, if it's around 23, come back down. And so if this was Mars' cycle, Mars takes 2 years to go around the sun. So this cycle would take 2 years as it's moving in the sine curve. If it was Jupiter, Jupiter takes 12 years to go around the sun. So this type cycle for Jupiter would take 12 years. Make sense? All right? So they're always, so at any one point, if you were to look at today, where the planets are, you can find out what signs are in, but it also will tell you what degree, either above the celestial equator, north, it'll say N, or south of the celestial equator for any planet as it's moving in that cycle. The sun does this in 1 year. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay? So, Pluto, let me see where to go from there. All right, Pluto takes 248 years to do that cycle, okay? And we're about, and this is what I'll get into, we're about to enter a cycle where Pluto is going out of bounds south, okay? And that only happens once every 248 years. So the last time Pluto went out of bounds south was during 1770 to 1790. So this is coming up next month. All right, I'm setting up for her whole thing. So from September of 2025 until 2035, Pluto's going to be moving out of bounds south for those 10 years. Very significant. Okay? And after this is done in 2035, something amazing is happening. That's what I'm going to tell you. All right?
Many of us won't be alive.
Yeah, well, all right. So Rosie Finn took the Pluto cycle, and she found that there's 4 stages to it. And she started from around 1800 BC. And from 1800 BC until the cycle we're in, there's been 16 Pluto 248-year Pluto cycles. If you divide 248 into 1800, you get 16.
What?
So, makes sense? So Pluto has gone through this. Pluto's made 16 revolutions around the sun since 1800 BC. All right? And it's following this pattern. All right? And the planets sometimes go out of bounds. Right? So out of bounds is when they go up above this 23 degrees 47. It's either out of bounds north or out of bounds south. All right? When a planet is out of bounds, you know the Lou Reed song, "Take a Walk on the Wild Side"? Yeah. That's the planets are taking a walk on the wild side when they're out of bounds. All right? So if I always look to see when I do a birth chart, was that person born with any planet out of bounds? Like if a woman's born with Mars out of bounds, they're not your typical soft, shy female. They are tomboys from the age of 3. They take risks. They like doing things with boys. And that carries on into later in life. They're strong. They can be very soft and feminine, but they've got this really strong side. Mars out of bounds. They're daredevils. Okay. Other planets out of bounds. So Mercury's out of bounds. There's something unusual about how the person communicates or how they write. Okay. It sometimes indicates out of bounds planets exceptional abilities. Okay. Uranus rules astrology. I was born with Uranus out of bounds, and I always had this interest in astrology. Okay, so at any one point, when a planet is out of bounds for a period of time, it's affecting the whole world. All right. So if Mars goes out of bounds, which it does periodically, then there's going to be maybe more violence in the world, or more accidents, or plane crashes, or things like that. Margin. More crazy murderers or mass murders, anything, because Mars is strong and it's affecting people at that point. Kind of like the craziness that goes on at the full moon, but it's even more intense. Okay, so Mars, these planets, like I said, are taking a walk on the wild side, and it's for the good or bad. Okay, so all right.
So what would be good about Mars going out of bounds?
Sometimes, well, what would you think? What would be a good way of using? Maybe. You need to do something really forceful. Maybe you need to stand up to some situation, or maybe you need to stop some oppression, okay? And really tap into your warrior energy in a big way, just that kind of thing. Yeah, so it could be positive. Or you might have to have some big project or something that's scary.
An accomplishment.
An accomplishment, yeah. And it's
Flying
like,
along to Everest.
pardon? Yeah, climbing mountains, something like that, something really daring. Yeah, that's like scares you, and it's like, oh my God. But that extra Mars energy gives you the it's like extra rocket fuel. It's like the second stage, a rocket. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. So the Pluto cycle then. Yeah, here's a Pluto cycle. See that? So this is 248 years. So it's, she starts out her Pluto cycle of Rosie Finn. There's 16 of those going back to 1800 BC. It starts out at 0 degrees of the celestial equator, and then it goes up out of bounds for a while. And I'm going to explain these. So the beginning is a visionary period. Then there's a power period when it's out of bounds or misuse of power. And then it comes down to 0, and there's cries for justice. And then it comes down to the reform period, which is what we're entering, and then gradually comes back. Okay? So from here to here is 248 years. And in her book, this book, which she just recently published, she goes in detail about each of those 16 cycles, historically, looking at Western civilization, Asia, China, and looking at the main events in those cultures and civilizations and the main people. The main change makers, or the main kings and queens, or philosophers, and could see this pattern developing. Okay, that has developed consistently from when Pluto started going out of bounds. So every once every 3 to 5,000 years, it doesn't go out of bounds, and then it stays at, it doesn't do it for thousands of years. Then it starts up again. And that's the cycle we're about to enter. So I'll tell you. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to explain each of these, and then she's going to do that in her talk. Okay?
Oh, so it's not consecutive 16 times. There's big gaps of time in between each of the 16
Oh, I see.
cycles.
Yeah. She went back as far as she can go. So it looks like from around 2000 BC, before that Pluto wasn't going out of bounds for a long period. And then around 2000, 1800 BC, it started, coming up to now, okay? There's been 16. So that must be the giant cycle of times where for several thousand years, Pluto's going out of bounds, and that creates all kinds of problems. And then there seems to be long periods of time when Pluto doesn't go out of bounds, okay? And that's what we're heading into, which is good news, right?
It's not going into where it's
So-
not going out of bounds.
Pardon? We're entering a period where it's, I'll explain. So just keep these in mind. Visionary power, I'm going to explain them here. Cries for justice, reform, and new vision. Okay? And just to jump ahead, the period we're in now, this 248-year period we're in now started in 1861. All right? That was the visionary period. The power period was World War II in the 30s. The cries for justice were in the 1980s. And we're just heading here. Our cycle is going to end in the year 2107. So this 248-year cycle that we're in started in 1861 and will end in the year 2107, which is 80-some years from now. Make sense? That's
Could you define some of those terms, please?
Yeah, I'm going to now.
Okay.
All right. So starting from around 1800 BC, there have been 16 248-year Pluto cycles. Now all the quotes here are from her book, Persephone's Revolution, Pluto's Path, and her rose. So stage 1, when Pluto is at the visionary time, 0 degrees of latitude on the celestial equator, corresponds with people coming through with radical new ideas. New paradigms are presented by a few reformers, often in an academic setting. Could be scientific, Darwin, could be religious, new ideas, religious ideas, but new paradigm breakers. Usually the populace doesn't embrace these new ideas until much later, towards the reform period. But there's these people in the vision period are sowing the seeds for new cultural, new ways new cultural influences and new belief systems and value systems. Okay? radical new ideas.
And they're probably thought of as heretics.
Yeah, some of them are persecuted, etc. Okay. A vision period occurs when Pluto is at 0 degrees of declination, and it's heading north. And this vision period usually only lasts about 6 years. And here's a quote: "At the beginning of the vision cycle, a new world is born. It may not be obvious, but in hindsight, great minds, philosophers, polymaths live at the time of vision. Each cycle begins with visionaries, people who see beyond the current state of humanity, beyond the tumult, beyond the suffering, beyond the beliefs that hold reality so tightly. People who live and initiated new paradigms with Pluto at 0 declination moving north, including Thales, Aristotle, Ptolemy, Augustine of Hippo, Cicero, Mohammed, and his immediate followers, Hildegard von Bingen, Chaucer, Petrarch, Descartes, Kepler, and Galileo. Right? They were all born and writing and thinking around that cycle.
That would include Plato, right?
Uh,
Aristotle there. That would
Yeah, right. Because Plato was
his teacher.
Yeah. To start our current cycle, which is started in 1861-65, James Clerk Maxwell. Are people familiar with him? James
No.
Clerk? I'm going to do a talk on him because everything that's we take for granted in our modern world, cell phones, TV, cameras, every single thing, we wouldn't have the modern world without James Clerk Maxwell. He discovered the equations of electricity and magnetism. Einstein said if it wasn't for Maxwell, I stand on his shoulders, is what Einstein said. And he's from Scotland, and I saw a documentary, and they went around Glasgow and asking people, and there's a statue right there. The Scots didn't even know who he was. He's the most famous scientist who no one knows about. But the modern world will not exist without Maxwell. He came up with the equations of electricity and magnetism. So everything, television, cell phones, it all depends on space exploration. Darwin wrote a paper on evolution. This is during the vision period that we're in. Abraham Lincoln, Ramakrishna, Baha'i had a dream in a garden that launched the Baha'i faith. Madame Blavatsky fell off a horse and began having visions. Rockefeller invested in oil. Karl Marx wrote Das Kapital, etc. Okay? The titans of industry took quantum leaps in wealth, while even the word technology before even the word technology became relevant. All right, that started in 1861. And then the power, it's really, I think it's really the misuse of power. What happens then is, there's a bill, this is when Pluto is out of bounds north now. So Pluto's on, this powerful planet energy anyway, is out of bounds. It's on the wild side. It's going crazy. It's all it wants is power, control. And that's what drives these dictators and kings. So that's the time when empires are built, conquest, expand, amass more and more power, massive devastation and war. Typically, this period typically lasts 20 to 40 years. Okay? The power period occurs when Pluto is at extreme declination or out of bounds beyond the 23 degrees to the north.
Question
right?
here.
Which would be in this, would be up here in this range.
So
Okay?
Joe, what year would this stage 2 have started?
In our period?
Yeah, but in 1861 is a visionary period,
Yeah.
you said.
World War II, 1930s. Yeah, Hitler, Stalin, all the dictators, and the Japanese. Japanese went crazy with their conquest. All that was all during Pluto out of bounds to the north.
It's
This
interesting that
crazy urge for conquest and power. Pardon me.
it's almost like the fact that that guy figured out the equations for magnetism.
Yeah.
It's like when it goes out of bounds, it reaches its furthest.
Yeah.
And it's like it's a magnet drawing all
Yeah.
this energy from.
It's a good point because the abuse of power takes place after the vision. It's like they take those ideas and start maybe abusing them first. That's the first use of it.
Yeah.
Right.
And also I was thinking, because you haven't added the perfect masters and Baba's time period.
Right.
Baba wasn't born until 1894, and I'm just
Yeah.
wondering when Sai Baba became perfect master and started being the couture of all of the perfect masters until Baba was born. Do you remember, does anybody know what year that was, if we're talking about a visionary period? I didn't bring my cell phone in, so I
I
can't
looked at
look.
Baba's life falls from 1894 1969. It falls in somewhere after the visionary period of 1861 and before the justice period. It's like on either
Yeah, but he
it's like
was-
his life
He was
at the top
obviously,
period.
I'm just wondering,
Look
does
at here.
anybody know what Sai Baba, I'm not talking about, I'm just mentioning Baba because it relates to why I'm bringing up Sai
Right.
Baba in terms of visionary.
Right.
Sai Baba, remember, ran World War I.
Right.
And Baba, he was one of the major, not that all of them
Yeah.
were, major perfect masters Baba went to.
Well, that was
He
all
called him
happening, and
Parvartigar.
this would be this time period in here. Here's
Still- so
1861, 1930,
still
so it'd be in here
visionary.
sometime.
So Sai,
Yeah.
okay.
So Baba's life was kind of covered
Let's see him.
this period here that we're in.
Yeah, okay,
Good question.
yeah.
Yeah.
You're talking about visionary to add in the future.
So when Pluto moves out of bounds
Spiritual
north, tyrants, empire builders,
He
and war
died in
ravage the planet.
1918.
As if Pluto's underworld realm unfurls before us like a zombie apocalypse. The common masses experience a feeling of disempowerment, of being out of control and overwhelmed. Imagine living in the 30s and 40s. Fear ripples, but this is true of every 16-year cycle going back. This was our current one, started in 1861. You go back each time. Genghis Khan came into power and during the power of Pluto out of balance.
Whew,
Yeah.
that's a nasty.
And what he did. Yeah. The common masses experience a feeling of disempowerment, being out of control and overwhelmed. Fear ripples through society, and power-hungry dictators rise into power. This was the 1930s, the last time it was out of bounds north. Which comes first is hard to say, but Pluto out of bounds north spells a time of terror. The last time Pluto was out of bounds to the north was 1938 to 1953, with 1945-46 being the peak time of the most extreme declination. In the summer of 45, the U.S. perpetrated never-before-seen level of destruction on Japan, the dropping of the bomb. Amidst the backdrop of genocide, war, famine, nuclear radiation, and worldwide calamity, a new world order was established with the creation of the IMF, World Bank, United Nations. The Iron Curtain went up and the reigning superpowers divided countries. These unnatural cuts instigated ongoing conflict and war, like Pluto leaving its henchmen behind to continue its work. The National Security Act of 47 established the CIA, which went on to overthrow democracies around the world, and the NSA, organization known for their ongoing power trip. Israel became its own country in 48, setting off ongoing conflicts in the region. Due to the eccentric orbit, this is important, due to the eccentric orbit starting in 2035, Pluto will not go out of bounds again for the next 3,000 to 5,000 years.
The golden
That's the main
age.
point of her talk. That's the main hope, and I'm going to elaborate on that more. But Pluto's, this 1930 was the last time Pluto will go out of bounds for at least 3,000 years, maybe 5,000.
The golden age.
Yeah, all right, but let me fill in that whole picture. I just wanted to give you that. 1838. And then the stage 3 is when Pluto comes back down in each cycle, it comes back down to 0 degrees, okay, of declination. It's hitting the celestial equator. And that's when there's cries for justice. There's been all this abuse going on, and then we start to get the reformers, the people who are crying out in the wilderness. There's a leader dies, there's a power vacuum. Early reform movements are often crushed. These are early people who are standing up for people's rights. They often get because the dictators are still in power, but they're setting the template for the reform period that's coming. Like little martyrs, okay. And this period usually lasts just for a few years. This occurs when cries for justice when Pluto's at 0 degrees declination, heading south. And Rosie says, in this stage, a turning point, a crisis, and a cry for justice shifts the direction of humanity and move us onto a course of revolution, reformation, and into the reform period. Many times a powerful leader dies, and after a crisis in succession, a weaker leader steps into place, setting the stage for revolution. Later, after Genghis Khan, his son Kublai Khan tried to continue doing what he was doing and failed. He wasn't nearly as powerful as his father. Leaders who died and left the power vacuum in their wake include Ramses II, Egyptian pharaoh, King David of Judea, Augustus Caesar, and Lorenzo de Medici. In the power vacuum, radicals cry for justice. Jesus, Mani, Savonarola, Samuel Adams, and in our current justice cycle, the people with the that was our current justice cycle was 1986 to 1989. The people of Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Czechoslovakia stood up to the Soviets and played a part in the collapse. Turning points can take other forms, like the Battle of Talas that brought that paper from China to the Abbasid Caliphate in the Middle East. Columbus landing on Hispaniola, bringing gold and slaves from the New World to Europe. Or the Italian Renaissance that brought art and new tools of war to the world. Or the Great Awakening, when Jonathan Edwards got the colonists excited about freedom of religion. In our current cycle, Chernobyl exploded, bringing awareness to the dangers of nuclear energy. The Soviet Union fell in 15 different countries. That was a positive, that just kind of happened without much violence. And then the protests in Tiananmen Square, remember that? They were crushed, right? So those were, that was an example of the early protests squashed. And then finally, and this is the period we're heading into right now, it goes south. Pluto goes out of bounds south. And what she said, going back to 1800 BC through all these 16 cycles, every single time when Pluto is out of bounds south, it's the reform. That's when the dictators lose power, when human rights advance. Okay? They fight the dictators and people, and the authoritarians resist it, but they lose during the when Pluto's south. In the end, they lose. They have a choice. They either have to make concessions and adapt, or if they resist, they're fall. They're done. Okay?
What are the years?
Pardon?
What are the years that incorporate this period?
That we're coming into?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so in this cycle, we're just entering it. Someone's phone, can you get the phone? Okay, this is what's exciting. The reform period for the cycle we're in starts in about 3 weeks. That's why I wanted to do this. It starts actually September 11th.
And I'm going to come up and
So the reform period starts September 11th. This one cycle we're in that started in 1861 and ends 2107. It starts in a couple of weeks and will last for 10 years, going to 2035. And I'm going to elaborate on that. So that's why I wanted to do this. And what she said is, this is it. This is it. Pluto will not be going out of bounds again for at least 3,000 years. She went as far as she says 3,000 to 5,000 years. So Pluto won't be going out of bounds north, which is the abuse of power, and then it won't be going out of bounds south, which is the correction, where people get their power back. That won't be happening. After 2035, Pluto will be used in that sine curve, but it won't be going out of bounds north or south. Therefore, she predicts, and we'll hear her, that there's going to be a mass change of consciousness for more peace, more cooperation, because that Pluto on the wild side won't be happening. Isn't that exciting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So does it hold? I mean, does it stay that way? What's going to happen in the next 3 weeks?
Oh yeah, so
when it
Pluto,
gets back out of there,
this cycle, and the other thing she said is Pluto over the centuries has been, when it's out of bounds, has been out of bounds for less and less time. Let me show you a graphic on that. And that has, it used to be 40 years it was out of bounds, and then 30, and then 20, and now it's going to be 10 years, north or south. And the reason that is, you know, the Earth is tilted, its axis is tilted, and it's like a top, it wobbles. You ever see a top wobble? You know, that spin takes 26,000 years to go one circle. That's the basis of Vedic astrology, the sidereal astrology. You know that? 26,000 years. So, and Pluto's tilted at 17 degrees, and the spin cycle is starting to get more in alignment with the Pluto angle. And that's the astronomical reason why Pluto's been out of bounds less and less and less time period. Okay? But it looks like this if you did it on a graph.
How soon can we come and complain after September 11th?
Lots of people, actually.
Start getting ready for
All right, see this graph?
Yeah.
Good.
So this is Pluto going out of bounds north and south, and this I think she starts at around 0, around the time of Christ. But you can see gradually over the centuries, well, we're right about here. You can see gradually over the centuries, Pluto's spending less and less time out of bounds. Okay?
Yep.
And then from here, not at all for thousands of years. All right? And that is only because of the Earth's tilt in relation to the Earth's axis spinning, turning very, very slowly and lining up more with Pluto's tilt, the 17 degrees tilt. All right. Let's see where we're here. Prize for Justice.
Oh, Ben Gregory interviewed her.
Yeah, that's what we're going to watch.
Is Rosie from Europe?
No, she's from the U.S., West Coast.
From U.S.
Yeah.
Okay. You just passed it.
And then finally, the reform period. Right, that's what we're heading into in a couple weeks. Systems, empires collapse. Plan and execute a revolution, change everything. The radical ideas from the vision period, hundreds of years before, are now absorbed into everyday life. Okay? Before it was just for the few, and then it was misused, and then finally it gets integrated into the culture. It's the 100th monkey, that makes that shift. The reform period has been lasting a decreasing length of time over the centuries I just showed you. It has gone from lasting 40 years to only 10 in the upcoming cycle. A reform period occurs when Pluto is moving at extreme declination or out of bounds to the south. When Pluto transits out of bounds to the south, instead of tyrants, we see the people rise up through revolts, rebellions, chaos, implosions, collapse, and shifts that move from the internal to the external. How about this? The last time Pluto was out of bounds south was 1775 to 1796 during the American and French revolutions and everything else. That's the period we're in, similar. Okay? In 1775, the rebels in the colonies took out their muskets and mounted a revolution against the British Empire. When Pluto peaked in 1783, the war officially ended with the Treaty of Paris, calling a truce between the largest empire on the planet and a group of visionaries who started a new nation with a new constitution. 6 years later, in the same treaty, as the rebels stormed the Bastille, starting a time of terror and chaos in France. Finally, as Pluto left its out-of-bound journey in 1794, one of the leaders of the rebellion, Robespierre, was executed, ending the reign of terror. During the reform time, a rectification in the balance of power occurs. What was claimed and hoarded during the power time is released. People rise with new confidence and reclaim their power. No longer blinded by the tyrants and wannabe tyrants, people stand up to the powers that be, with few exceptions. Prior reform times have included movements where the general population, the masses, the everyday period, gain rights and power. Reform period for our current 248-year Pluto cycle starts September 11th, 2025 until 2035. Pluto will peak in extreme declination south in the years 2028 to 2030. Right? And then this is a quote of hers. This final Pluto and extreme declination period will force us to look at what must be healed and to go about the mysterious work of awakening. It is a tipping point, a time of healing old wounds, rectifying old imbalances, and rising into equality. It is time of looking squarely at the evil and darkness in the underworld, and with strength and courage, accepting the challenge of compassion. And then she says, the 248-year Pluto declination cycle appears to mark history in perfect lockstep without paradigm shift, from a time of visionaries to when tyrants build empires, to a crisis point that brings out cries for justice, and finally into a period of redemption reform, when the visions of the visionaries emanate through the populace, when the cries of justice of the few become cries of justice for the many, and when leaders either listen to the people or are ousted and revolutions take down despots. As we head into the reform period, that should be September 11th.
The last time Pluto goes out of bounds for thousands of years, a redemption, a revolution, a mass awakening of consciousness becomes not only possible, but likely. And this, to me, really fits in with what Bob was saying about the new humanity.
Yeah.
The extreme power and reform periods are ending. As Pluto travels out of bounds from 2025 to 30, it will be the last period of going out of bounds, either north of thousands or thousands of years. One could even argue that of all the past 16 Pluto cycles dating back to 1800 BC have been leading to this final reform period that we're heading into. It's like, this is it. You know, all those power, all that stuff. And that's why I think the dictators in the world, they sense it. They sense it's do or die for them unconsciously. And that's why I think they're clamping down or putting up more barriers, because they know that they have to dig their heels in and keep their claws in power more strongly, because they're going to lose anyway. But that's why I think we're seeing in this country and elsewhere some extreme uses of power that we've never seen before. Let's see.
Well, democratic.
One can even argue that of all the past 16 Pluto cycles have been leading to this one. This radical 10-year window of peaceful protest into peaceful coexistence with each other, with nature, and with all life. As a result, after 2035, the planet Earth and the beings on it will not be subjugated to the fearsome effects of Pluto's dark side. Alongside the gradually evolving Aquarian age, the evidence I found, this is Rosie speaking, in my research suggests that times of extreme abuse and revolution will recede into history. For all of humanity's recorded history, Pluto has been going into extreme declination north, correlating with massive takeovers and violence, abusive dictators and warlords. The last time Pluto was out of bounds north, 38 to 49, 73 million people died within 6 years. History tells us that a redemption, a revolution, a mass awakening of consciousness becomes not only possible, but likely in the time ahead. All right. And here's some additional notes that I put here before we watch the interview. From 26 to 35, Pluto will be out of bounds south for 5 months of each of those years, from August to December. All right? In 2025, this year, well, it will start September 11th, but it'll only be out of bounds for 2 months. Okay, so we're just getting a taster this year. So it really starts next August for the following 9 years, from August to December. So from January until July in each of those years, people will have an opportunity to process and integrate the dramatic events that happen from August to December and plan their next steps. We're already seeing it. I mean, regardless, just counting the news. On June 14th, Independence Day, 4 to 5 million people came out. It was the largest demonstration in the country's history. And so that's just before this is starting. That was like often you see things happening that are a prelude to what's going on. And that's just a prelude. So it's guaranteed over the next 10 years, that 4 million is going to be 8 million. It's going to be massive demonstrations in this country, in Russia, all over the world. Peaceful, there's going to be violence. It's going to be a difficult period. I know it's going to be. There's going to be repeats of Tiananmen Square maybe. But in the end, based on history here, and it seems to be, and based on what Baba said, the tyrants, the dictators, and authoritarian leaders are going to lose. It's over. And so this next 10 years is going to be an amazing time of change, for a positive. Our current 248-year Pluto cycle, which began in 1861, will end in the year 2107. That's a new vision period, and I think that's the most likely a time when the visionaries of the new humanity emerge. Okay? 21 at that period. Okay, and then Baba said he would return in 700 years, right? So starting from the year 2100, when the next Pluto cycle begins, 248-year Pluto cycles takes us to the year 2600. So approximately 500 years, 250 times 2, added to 2107, that takes us to 2600. So when Baba comes back, we will have had 2 Pluto cycles with no abuse of power. It's like the new humanity, I'm guessing, will be established by then. Exactly what Baba said. When I come back in 700 years, does anybody remember the exact quote? when I come back in 1700 years, a new humanity will be established in the world. He said that. So that's going to take place over this next 2 Pluto cycles starting in 2107. Okay? Pluto will not go out of bounds during the 2 Pluto cycles preceding the avatar's next appearance. This confirms what Baba predicted, that the new humanity will be firmly established when he returns in 700 years. All right? Cool. And there's a quote of Baba's. After all the current chaos in the world, there will be a complete change. A new world order will rise in which all are equal. There won't be communism, socialism, or fascism, which are all formed on a material basis. My plan will be on a spiritual basis, in which there will be no poor and no rich, but all given equal status community. Great nations that have enjoyed a predominance of power for so long will now have a fall and will be on a par with others. And I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen in the United States and over the next so many years. We're going to, this ego, we're the greatest, the ego part of it's going to get crushed. And like what happened in England, it's going to be one nation among many. That's where we're headed. And here's a quote from Jeff Green, one of the founders of evolutionary astrology, along similar lines. He says, on a national level, it is interesting to remember that Pluto is in Capricorn in the USA birth chart. The day will come when the United States will fall from grace. One day will not be the world power that it is today. It will be one nation among many. This will force a restructuring of the national soul so that a new collective self-image can evolve. The national sense of security linked with being a world power will have to change as a result of the evolutionary necessity. And he wrote that in '94. And that's, whenever you see Pluto in Capricorn or Pluto in the 10th house, which is the Capricorn-Saturn house, or if someone's born with Pluto in Capricorn, there's often, their ego is too much attached to power. And Nixon had Pluto in the 10th house. And often they have this downfall because of their blind spot. Okay, they abuse the power and they get caught and they're called on they're brought to court or whatever, and they resist and they resist and they have the downfall. That goes with, and USA has Pluto in Capricorn. So that fits with Baba said. All right, any questions about any of that? Yeah, anything you didn't understand, because we're going to watch the interview now. Now check their basis and for theory. Let's listen to her. This is an hour long. And it's Pam Gregory, who some of you know, British astrologers interviewing Rosie.
Number one mistake with the salt and ice trick that's keeping you fat. I was doing the salt trick wrong for months. No results. Then I learned the exact order and timing of the ingredients.
Trying to get a full screen.
And a lot of astrologers use parallel contra-parallels, and that has to do with when the
Can you give us a break for 10 minutes?
Does everybody want a break for 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Washington.
Yeah, so good point, thank you.
That means